Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another video in our basic networking course where we are going to be covering Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, or DHCP. DHCP in a nutshell is just a way to automatically provision IP addresses to devices in your network. In the same sense that OSPF helps us make network routing easier, DHCP helps make IP addressing on our devices easier because we don't have to go around to each individual one and give them an IP address and keep track of it. So normally in a big network you would probably have a dedicated server for DHCP, and that server would provision that for all of your devices, but Cisco also allows their routers to act as DHCP servers, and that's what we'll be covering today. We do have a list of new commands for this section. The first one is show IP DHCP pool. This will display the DHCP pools that you've configured on the device. The next command, IP DHCP excluded -address, followed by the start address and the end address, will specify a range of addresses that you don't want your server to hand out because you probably want those to be statically configured on some devices and never change. The following command, IP DHCP pool, followed by the pool name, will create a new DHCP pool and enter DHCP configuration. Within that configuration, you can issue the network, followed by a network address and a subnet mask to specify a network for addresses that you want handed out via DHCP. We want to remember to add this following command of default-router, followed by the default gateway address, because that'll configure the default gateway that gets handed out to our devices. Remember, every device is going to need an IP address, a subnet mask, and a default gateway if they're going to communicate over the internet. And our final command is IP helper-address, followed by the next hop router interface where the broadcasts for DHCP are going to be forwarded. So if the DHCP server isn't your directly connected router, you can configure this on that directly connected router to point towards the router that is going to serve DHCP to your network. So let's move right into the lab section. If you haven't already, I would encourage you to take the time to download this content in the link in the video description below and attempt the lab for yourself, or just save it for your notes. But let's hop right into this. The purpose of our lab is to configure the network for DHCP. So over here we have our network of 1110/24. Looks like we have a router that's going to be a helper, and then we have a router that's going to act as our DHCP server over here. Alright, let's hop into our tasks here. Task 1 says configure the router to exclude the first 128 addresses in the network from the DHCP pool. So if we open up that router that's going to act as our DHCP server, we look at our commands over here. We're going to get into global configuration mode, and then we're going to go IP DHCP excluded-address, followed by the start address, which would be 1.1.1.1, and then the ending address, which would be 1.1.1.128. We'll go ahead and hit enter there, and that's going to exclude the first 128 addresses and not hand them out via DHCP. Let's look at our next task here. It says configure a DHCP pool on the DHCP router named local. Use the network provided and make sure the default gateway is also provisioned. So we can hop back in here. We're going to go ahead and issue the command IP DHCP pool local, enter, and now we're in the configuration for that DHCP pool. Here we can go ahead and issue the command network 1.1.1.0, followed by the subnet mask, which is 255.255.255.0, and that will tell our device that we want to provide DHCP to this network. But we also need to include default-router, and we'll give that the address of 1.1.1.1 because that represents the router that's directly connected to our devices that will act as their default gateway to access the internet. So we can push enter on that and move on to the next task. So task number 3 says verify the DHCP configuration on the router. So if we hop in here, when we go back to privileged exec mode, we can issue the show IP DHCP pool command. here we can see we do indeed have a pool. It's called local, and it's going to provision DHCP for these addresses, 1111 to 111.254. And we know that we've excluded the first half of that range. Moving on to the next task, it says configure the helper router to forward DHCP broadcasts to the DHCP router. So we hop into the helper router. We're going to hop into global configuration mode. And then we need to hop in to the interface that's going to be receiving DHCP broadcast from our local network, which would be this 1111 right here. So if we do show IP interface brief to figure out which one that's on, it looks like that's on G001. So we'll hop into that interface. And from here we can issue this IP helper-address, and we're going to give it this address of our DHCP interface that's connected to us, which would be 2.2.2.1. We'll hit enter. And that should configure this router to forward those DHCP broadcasts that it receives from the devices over to our DHCP server. Now finally we can go into task number 5, which says configure the computers to receive IP via DHCP, then verify connectivity. So if we hop into each of these devices, into the desktop IP configuration, we should be able to click this DHCP tab. You see it's requesting an IP address. The first time might fail with packet tracer, so let's do it again. And there we go. We did get a DHCP successful, and now we've been given the address 1.1.1.129. Let's hop into the next PC, do the same thing. And that was successful. And the last computer, same thing. And that was successful. Finally, it says verify connectivity, so let's go ahead and just see if we can ping out to the internet to that DHCP server. So if we ping 2.2.2.1, we do indeed have connectivity. So that was a really brief overview of how you can configure a Cisco router to provision DHCP to your network. I hope that you got something out of this video, and we'll see you in the next one.